Right, we're all sitting comfortably.
I got a mid-yawn.
Jake, you're always mid-yawn. So. Welcome to the Cutting Room Podcast, brought to you by 7 Videos and me, Paul Sherwood. Each week we'll be cutting through the things that you want to know about video marketing. 7 Videos have been going for nearly 10 years now, and over that time we've had many achievements but also learnt a lot of things along the way. This podcast is an opportunity for us to share all that knowledge and all that experience with you. Each episode is going to focus on a different topic, concluding with our 7 top tips that you can start to put into action in your business. As with all podcasts out there, you know the drill. If you think it's any good, don't forget to give us a follow and keep up to date on when the next episode drops. Hello and welcome to episode 4 of The Cutting Room, and this week we're going to be talking all about how to create the best video case studies. I'm Paul Sherwood, one of the founders here at 7 Videos, and I'm delighted to be joined by Joe, another one of our founders, and Jake, who's our producer. How are we feeling today, guys?
Good, really good.
Yeah, I think we're getting into the swing of podcasting now.
Yeah, so episode number 4. I'd like to think we're becoming somewhat professional in this field now, would we say?
Quite viral any day, I reckon.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. No, I think it's good just being back in the room. I just find it really fun just kind of talking through like things that we've learned and looking back on things and then kind of how we've improved things to then give insight to people. I think it's, yeah.
So this week's all about creating video case studies. These are probably the most popular type of videos that we create. They've got a varied perception, I guess. Some people see them as the best thing that deliver the best return, and some people can sort of perceive them as being a bit boring and being a bit sort of older. So where do we sit with all that?
For me, I do genuinely think case studies are probably one of the best ways of getting return on investment in video. Like I understand where some people may think they are not necessarily the sexiest of videos that you can create comparing to other ones, but if you get it right, and we'll talk through how to make a good case study, if you get it right, I think they're perfect really to kind of convince buyers, potential customers to take that next step, because who's better at telling your story and what you stand for and why people should buy from you than people that have already done it? Do you know what I mean? It's all well and good having a nice promo video, which looks really cool, tells you everything you need to know, but you need that kind of reassurance from other people.
I'd probably challenge that perception and that they can be perceived as boring, is because it's the best opportunity to actually tell a story. You know, you've got all sorts of different types of videos, brand videos, explainer videos. This is your real chance to kind of really go on that sort of story arc that you see in lots of films and you know, really place your company at the heart of something really good that's happened.
It's like anything. If you don't do it very well, it can be boring. If you do it really well, it's the opposite. So I guess it can apply to anything really. Again, just to let you know, there's quite a bit of building work going on in our office at the moment. So if you do hear the odd bang here and there, then we're just going to sort of power through. So to get us started in terms of creating the best video case studies, I guess it surely comes down to picking the right clients first, right?
I think that's one of the most important things involved in creating case studies, because if you don't have the right company and the right person telling the story, if they're not going to be that engaging and interesting, there's only so much you can do to actually bring that out of them. So I think the key things you need to look at is a company that you've really delivered a lot of impact for. I think obviously without that main story of solving a credible problem, you're not really going to end up with something that is that meaningful to the viewer.
But I think that problem also needs to be relatable to your target audience as well.
Yeah, exactly. Because if that problem isn't relatable to that target audience, then it's harder for them to connect with. And you need to really think about who your different personas are and whether that's certain products that you're selling, and trying to find the right case studies that match with those similar problems so people can relate to. And I think when you're looking at pulling together case studies, you do need to think a bit more strategically and look at where this case study is going to sit and kind of who you're hoping to attract with it. And then you've also kind of got to look into, is that company name kind of recognised within the industry as well? Because that's always good recognition and good credibility if they're a massive company within that sector, as well as, like Jake, you mentioned about having delivered something actually impactful and something where you can show that you've delivered either a good return on investment or whatever the results were.
It's making sure that your case studies do tally up with what your target audience are looking for and solving those problems. And I guess there's more than one problem. So when you're looking to create case study content, you're probably looking at providing multiple pieces of content.
When telling us the story of your business, you've probably got various different things that you would say sets you apart from the competition, be that experience, quality of product, whatever it may be. Now, not all of your customers will have experienced every single one of those things that you're really going to shout about, and it's something that we do also say when creating any video, is you don't want to try and achieve too much in one piece. So I think it all comes down to creating some sort of plan around how your case studies are actually going to work for you before you decide to make them. So if you can break your business down into, what things would you say that you do well and what do you want to come across to your target audience? Like we've done it a little bit with our values. We want a case study that reflects each of our values.
Quick test, what are our 3 values, Jake?
We do what we say we'll... No. We do what we say we'll do when we say we'll do it. That's the mouthful one that I can't get over. Life's too short for boring. Let's have some fun. And if we don't love it, it doesn't get out the door.
Absolutely love it, but very, very close.
Yeah. You've got the essence. Yeah.
Nice to see we live and breathe them as well by the fact you just answered it so off the cuff.
And I think the other thing is, I think sometimes people can be guilty of choosing the company that they think are just most likely to give them a case study, and it's something we were guilty of when we first started Seven. They'd be like,
"Oh, they're nice.
They're nice. They like working with us.
Yeah.
They'll give us one." Yeah. And it's like it's so key to have that strategy and plan in place to then find the right people for it, rather than just anybody who will give you a case study, because they might say lovely things about how great you are, but it won't reach or hit the same pain points of your target audience or target sector.
Yeah, a really great example that I've seen, just going back to producing series of case studies, and I think a really effective thing you can do is actually create almost like a branded series of case studies. And someone who did this really well was a graphic design company called Canva, and what they did is they created this series called Design Stories, which obviously they keep adding videos to. So they go around finding different examples of professionals that have really unlocked their potential using their software, and they become part of this series. So I think having that almost iconic name to attribute the case studies to really creates that brand affinity and familiarity amongst your target audience.
It's something we've done pretty similar here at Seven, really, in terms of having those complementary case studies. So we work a lot in the IT and telecom sector, so we've got quite a few case studies in that industry, but we also work on a local level, so we've got a case study from a local authority there to support that. We work on an international scale, so we've got case studies from companies like Heineken to add that credibility piece, and we're soon going to have case studies that are more product specific as well, around events and remote filming. And now we've got this suite of case study content that can be tailored depending on what conversations we're having or where our clients fit.
I think your case study page on your website should also act almost like your services or your products pages. It's just you're telling that through the words and of your clients who have had good experience in those different areas.
And if you don't do it strategically like that, quite often you'll just end up with the same kind of general case study questions that you'd asked, where it's like, oh, they were lovely to work with, they were on time, always go the extra mile, really creative and professional. It's like, so it's fucking everyone. Yeah. and if you haven't thought about it like that, then you can't focus on those real bits and kind of the information that you need to get across that people are going to kind of resonate with, and kind of answers those same problems that they're struggling with as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think that's touching on finding the right people and the right case studies and the ones that are going to complement each other. So getting into actually creating a case study, what do you need to do?
I think you've got to be very clear on what the story is and almost treat it as that sort of the start, middle and end. So you're kind of looking around the challenges, what kind of problems was your client having when they chose to engage with you, what did you do, how did you go about solving that, what was the outcome, what did the client end up with, and then touching on the key benefits that they've seen as a result. And then it's always good to sort of have a little bit of a reflection section at the end where you...
Section, that's got a nice little ring to it.
Where you kind of reflect on the relationship, how it's been to work with each other, and then sort of touching on plans for the future. I think that usually is how we tend to go with case studies. That's not to say it's got to be like that every time. It's just you've got to make sure that there's some sort of story arc, like a rise and fall with it, like you would see in a normal film. You know, you start off with something that happens, like there's a challenge, the hero, your company, comes along and solves that, and then in the end, everyone's in a better position as a result.
So who's the villain in the story then?
The villain will be the problem. So say if you're, I don't know, working with an accountant who's...
hating on all the accountants out
yeah,
there.
no, sound like Gary King.
Normally it's bad internet speed.
But do you know what I mean? Like it's like you're working with a previous supplier who isn't living up to standards. So because they're not doing their job effectively, it might be losing you money, or you might not be getting the return on investment that you want. So that's kind of the villain, and the hero kind of comes in to save the protagonist, which is your company, and that's how you solve their problems. Like you say, I think that structure is a really good structure to start from. And then the key bit is how you find, just when you put it like that, it can sound a bit like kind of, what's the word? Lack of personality maybe, or a bit kind of formulaic. The key bit is to kind of start off with that and then dig deeper to find out what those results, what those challenges kind of meant for the people involved, whether that's the people on the ground, the key stakeholders, kind of what impact does it have on them personally as well, to try and get that connection with the story with the viewer.
And it's a nice way of sort of introducing storytelling as well, because it's something we talk about a lot here, and it's, you maybe think case study, it's question, you ask them a question, they give you an answer, there's no kind of craft and story element to it, but that couldn't be really sort of further away from the truth. And you know, it's about, I guess, trying to find some kind of emotional hook within that story as well.
Yeah, I think that's important to establish quite early in the video, to sort of draw people into, you know, what are they actually doing here, what problem is being solved. And a good way of doing that is sort of starting out by perhaps someone saying, we were struggling with this and it was really starting to affect us in this way. You know, the business we weren't sure what was going to happen. That kind of stuff really kind of draws people in. We'll think, well, how did they solve that? What happened? And that's where you kind of draw people in. And I think in everyday life, like, everyone resonates more with personal feelings because everyone's experienced that. So to hear that from someone else, yes, someone might be the CEO of an internet provider. I don't know that much about that, but if he talks about how it was really stressing him out because he didn't really know the direction his business was going to go into, well, I can resonate with the fact that he's facing a stressful situation. So that's kind of how you level the playing field, I think.
But how do you get to that level of detail?
Good question. I think,
would it be through sort of effective interviewing techniques and really, or in...
What we do in terms of the process that we have, we'll always have an initial pre-production call with our client and their client to really kind of understand the story and the relationship between the two. So kind of what were the problems, how have they overcome it, and kind of what does that look like? What did success look like, and how was it achieved? And And the key thing to really find out is who's going to be the best person to ask those questions. So making sure that it lines up with your target audience. So if you're dealing with a marketing director, you need to show a marketing director in the video because that is who they're going to relate to. They may not always be the one who knows the most about the actual product or service, which is fine because the person needs to relate to that person, not necessarily the person who's kind of executing. You can still have them in it and have interesting bits from them, but the key is having the right people. And then once you've got the right person, it's really digging down. Is that even a thing?
You don't dig up, so
that's true.
You do dig up.
Down, no. Anyway, so you really need to kind of dig deep into kind of what these things actually meant to those people on an individual basis as well. So if you've delivered a great return on investment or you've delivered these results, what did that mean for you personally as well? How does that make you feel? Because that's the way you kind of get people to connect with it, is kind of connect on that level.
And like you say, market directors, they're going to have similar roles and responsibilities, and certain things that they do are going to impact their lives maybe in certain ways. So if you see that it's had such a positive impact on someone's life because of the products that you've created, then it's going to generate that interest. So that's kind of covering a lot of the kind of story elements. I know sort of, you two are more the creative types and very much focused on the storytelling aspects. Myself, results person. How crucial is it to include sort of tangible results, stats, figures in your case studies as well?
I think they are obviously very important because at the end of the day, you can't argue with numbers and facts, and I think when someone is coming to you to use you as a company, the main thing they want to make sure happens is that they achieve a certain amount of return on investment or an increase in sales, whatever it may be. It's going to be a result, and the fact that you can show that and basically validate almost what you're doing with your other clients, that can be the difference between someone using you and not using you. Having said that, I think it's important to make sure that it's not just purely results within your case study. It's got to kind of work in tandem with the things that we've said, like making sure the story's right, making sure it's engaging, and making sure who's ever delivering the content is engaging themselves. But I do think that, as you say, those key tangible results, you can't argue with them, and they are really going to be the things that drive the impact of the video, I think.
And without it, it's not really a case study. You're right in the sense that it doesn't want to be just facts and figures all the time, but you do kind of need those tangible results, because otherwise it's just going to be a lot of wishy-washy. Yeah, they were lovely to work with.
There's no outcome to it.
No
result.
Yeah, and that's what you need to know as a business owner. And
I think the story and the link between the story aspect and the results aspect is the story is going to keep the viewer engaged with the content, and the results are going to be the one that's going to drive action, essentially. For myself, as a business owner that purchases services, products, you make a lot of investment decisions based on the results of that company. But it's the story that's going to keep them watching throughout.
Without one, the other doesn't work.
But results more important.
Yeah, well, I think it depends which way you look. Like with my kind of like business owners hat, yeah, it is, because that's what's going to convince me.
I think that the story element of things kind of builds that sort of, yes, they're a good company to work with, but in terms of making that buying decision, I think it's those results that just top up that confidence in you as a company and make the difference.
So what kind of stats, I guess it's kind of relevant to whatever the particular business is, but what kind of things should we be asking? Because I know when we first started out creating case studies sort of 10 years ago, we were sometimes the first time we'd even speak to the interviewee would be in a live environment, and we wouldn't get the answers that we were hoping for. So what do we need to be doing to prepare from a results and tangible results aspect to make sure you've got everything?
I think it's really important to really understand what's important to the client in terms of making a purchasing decision in the first place. And you need to think about that in the early stages of the story in terms of, what were your goals when coming to seeking out the support of our company? So what were you looking to get out of it? And if you can kind of say, well, I wanted to increase in sales from a very basic point of view, and at the end you say, we increased our sales by X%, it's a very clear sort of, we wanted to do this, we achieved that, this is the number. So I think getting those results almost prepared. Sometimes you do need to say to someone, oh, could you just check that? They may have the information available, but from their understanding, they might not know that you need to know that for this, but it is quite important to, as we've mentioned, to include that. So it is worth just beforehand just saying, do you have any kind of numbers or results?
Because you need to know right at the start, like when you have those, like you say, that first call, you need to check that. Just back in the day, somebody turn up to when we didn't have such a thorough process. Sometimes I disagree with what our client has said has happened. So like for them to be,
you don't want to get into an argument with them while you're doing it.
Like you've had it where they're like, oh no, we haven't done that. So it's key that they're really bought in and bought into the case study themselves. So asking those questions right at the beginning, that enables you to kind of get those answers when you're there. Like you say, all that needs to happen way before you get to an interview room and sitting down and speaking with them.
We don't want any surprises, do you? And there's we've touched on it, how sort of clients, first thing they come to us, generally speaking, is a list of questions for a case study. Oh, I've got a case study I want to do. I've got 10 questions, but fundamentally we don't care about what the questions are. It's kind of our job to come up with the questions. It's the results we want to be focused on. Yes, there's going to be an element of questioning throughout the pre-production phase to understand what that journey has been like, but in terms of the creation of that particular video, it's very much focused on what those results are and understanding what they're going to say before they're going to say it.
Yeah, I think one thing that I have noticed over the years is kind of when the questions do come from someone who's maybe not as familiar with creating case studies, is the questions can be quite sort of open-ended, and it can be kind of like, how was working with our company, very sort of open-ended, and someone could say, literally, there's hundreds of answers you can give to that, whereas if you ask something very specific in terms of, how was the customer service, how was, what results did we achieve, what were the benefits, going into those different areas, you're going to get much more specific answers, and you can really sort of be more deliberate with your content, I think, in that way.
I think it's utilising like the skills of video companies and the interviewing techniques to get the best results. I've seen various people share testimonials online recently, and it's quite clear that they've just asked that individual to say a little bit about working with them, and they maybe don't always sound as enthusiastic as what they would have done if they'd been interviewed, because as we know, it can take you a few questions to get warmed up, and a technique that we'll do is we'll go back and ask those first few questions again once the interviewees kind of got into the swing of it. So I think it's also quite important to have the people who are, there's a skill to interviewing, isn't there?
It's easy to ask a question. Right? There's no skill in just asking questions. It's kind of what you do with that response and coaching them, but also enabling them to kind of be more concise and to get to the messaging that you want. Because like I say, anyone can ask a question, but it's how you get the answer that you want. And touch on your point that with clients just sending over a list of questions, that's really, the questions are the last things that you look at. It's the messages and understanding that. And then what a good interviewer will do, they know exactly what they want to get out of this interview, and their job is to get it out, not, we've got these questions, let's see what turns up.
Pretty much how I interview you guys when we do this.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And in fact, we did it, like you say, back in the day, like when we first started, and you are kind of a bit like, so something good comes out of this.
Yeah, don't leave anything to chance, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think we've covered kind of who we're looking to capture case study content with. We've got into, I guess, the creation of it around storytelling and results focused. I feel like, and the final area we've probably not covered, although we've probably touched on, is I guess the delivery when you're actually doing the interview. So getting that personalities across.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to sort of utilising any sort of skills and experience you do have within your organisation in terms of interviewing, but it's also making sure, again, going back to the beginning in selecting the right client, is someone that you do have a good relationship with, and someone that's passionate about what they're talking about. And I think you can tell that in early conversations if someone does have a lot to say, and then they do truly believe in what they're doing. You're definitely going to get a much better performance out of them, and their personality will come to the fore.
But it's not always, and I take your point, but I would say it's not always the most passionate, because sometimes those that are the most passionate can talk for hours and hours about a particular like say the subject matter expert in a particular thing isn't always the best person, in my opinion, to deliver it, because you need somebody who's going to be able to speak concisely and summarize that. So I think for me it's probably having that blend of characteristics in that individual.
Definitely, yeah, and I think you can establish that by almost, as Joe's referred to, in asking those questions early on, and sort of doing it in a more informal setting, and sort of just listening to how they talk about you guys as a company. You can almost envisage them being in the case study there and then. Does it work? Does it not work? I think you can get a good idea early on.
And it's coming down to the persona of your target audience, as you mentioned at the start. It's, if your target audience is marketing directors, say if it's for videos, then you ideally want your case studies to be spoken to by the director level, as opposed to, say, an exec who you've worked with and who's enjoyed the service and that side of things, where the director will probably focus more on results. So it's making sure that matches up with your target audience as well.
The other thing to bear in mind about kind of getting the right response and getting the personality across is if you don't, it's to really try get to know that person as well as you can. Realistically, that's not always going to happen. You're not going to have loads of phone calls with them and get to meet them a lot. So one thing that we always do is try to make sure we have enough time at the start of interviews, just so that interviewee can feel comfortable with you and get to know you a bit more. And a trick we've done sometimes is you kind of touch on some of those questions you're going to ask before you sit down, just in passing conversation, because that's quite often where you can get some of the best answers.
That's a really key point as well, actually, is around the scheduling of the interviews.
Yeah.
And if you're doing a few, the amount of times we hear, well, it only takes 5 minutes to do an interview, doesn't it? It's like, well, you can ask the questions in 5 minutes, but the more time you afford to that interview, the more time you allow, the professional to get the best delivery and the best results that's going to create the best videos. So it's making sure that you don't just cram your interview schedule so tight that there's no room for building rapport, working on delivery and all that side of things as well.
Yeah, and it adds more pressure to them as well. If you know that you've only, like the interviewee, if you've only got 10 minutes.
Yeah, right, best crack on, go on, yeah.
Yeah.
It's worth thinking about as well, if it is someone that you've had a personal kind of good relationship with over the years, and you've got a good rapport with them, and if you're going to be on site, you're likely to get some sort of B-roll footage with them as well, and it really does come across when it's clear that you do have a good kind of rapport with each other. So I think it's worth bearing in mind if the opportunity is there to do that, then definitely take advantage of it.
Yeah, it's all about getting the personality of the individual across, and that brand personality, and I guess, like you say, the personality of that relationship between sort of supplier and client. I think the final point we just wanted to touch upon, which kind of features quite prominently throughout pretty much any video that you do create, and that's that sort of clear call to action.
Yeah, without a clear call to action, it can almost be pointless doing it. You need to be very clear as to what you want the viewer to do next. So are you wanting them to watch more video cases? Are you wanting to download an ebook? Are you wanting to, do you know what I mean? Whatever that goal is, you need to make that clear at the end of the video and not try shove too many things in.
That's what a call to action is like you say, it's website, email, telephone, Twitter handle, you name it, it's all crammed on there. No one's going to retain any of that information, but just a clear directive of what you want the viewer to do next will give them a much better chance of doing so than not saying anything at all.
I think that as well, once you've got to that point in the video, presuming you've done your case study well, your viewer's going to be the most impressionable point that they are throughout the whole thing, and they probably are ready for that next step. What do I need to do next to kind of move on in this kind of journey that they're on? And I think an important part of that as well at the end of the video is to include some sort of recommendation as well. It's one of the questions that I'd say we probably ask on every single case study that we've ever been part of. It's just that kind of sign off from your client saying, we've had a very good experience. I'm happy to almost put my neck on the line and say, yes, I think other people should use these guys because we've had such a good experience. And like I say, that kind of gets the viewer to a point where they're like, okay, yep, these guys are happy. I want to go achieve these results. What do I do next? And there it is at the end.
Yeah, definitely. I think there was one other point which we were going to sort of touch on, but we've not quite got to, is just around making sure you're asking your clients, building it into your process. As we mentioned on a previous episode, we now do a feedback call after every project, and that, providing everything goes well and we get 10 out of 10 feedback and all that side of things, it presents a perfect opportunity to ask them there and then. Since we've started to ask for more feedback, the amount of case studies that we're creating has jumped up massively as well.
So sometimes people can be a bit nervous or scared to reach out and ask people, don't they? So having it part of the process like that is the best way of doing it. And if they say no, at least you know that there's something wrong with the process and you can fix it.
I think the more case studies you can have as well can really sort of affect the perception of your company. I think if you decide to do case studies but you only ever do one, it can almost have the reverse effect to say, well, why have you only got one? Why has only one person ever had a good experience? I think coming into the whole sort of making sure that all your case studies work well together, I think having more of them obviously just gives off that impression that you're hitting the mark every single time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's about it really in terms of episode 4. So we've been chatting through what those sort of or how to create the best video case studies. So I guess just before we go, I just want to sort of round up what those sort of 7 top tips are that we've been chatting through. So firstly, is to make sure that you pick the right clients to work with. Secondly is to create a complementary suite of case study videos, whether that's based on industry, size or product. Thirdly, you want to be clear on what the story is, so what the problem was and what the outcome. Number 4, look for an emotional hook. What was the personal impact on that particular story? Number 5, focus on emphasising key stats and figures and tangible results. Number 6, ensure you get your personality across, whether that's on a brand or an individual level. And finally, number 7, as with most videos you create, or all videos you create, is to have a clear call to action.
Speaking of call to action, if you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, then make sure you rate and subscribe to the channel to get more wonderful insights.
There we go.
That was not a very clear call to action.
Thanks for joining us this week, and we look forward to joining you in a couple of weeks.
See you soon. I'll cut that bit.
See you soon.